They found her at the edge of the basin, barefoot and blood-bright in the snow, where the pines give way to open earth and the air snaps cold against your teeth. A woman alone out there, torn dress like winter's flag, face dirt-streaked and cut from running through bramble. The preacher's wife said she'd conjured the storm that stranded the wagon train. The blacksmith claimed his milk cow miscarried after she looked it in the eye. And the boy who broke his arm swore she mumbled words over his bones that made them itch and twist. So they called her witch. They didn't ask where she came from, didn't care if the lash marks on her back were from a man or the road or her own choosing. They only saw what they feared and what they didn't understand. And when the wind rose again and the coyotes started yipping clothes, they voted with a shovel and a shove. The snow came soft as ash. The men turned their backs. The preacher said a prayer without her name in it. By the time the sun slung itself up over the ridgeline, she was gone. A few scraps of wool and blood where she'd been. No footprints, no body. Just the memory of her scream threaded through the pine. 3 days later, he rode into that same basin on a horse long-legged and mew-ugly, with a coat across his saddle too fine for a drifter. He wasn't from the town, no one knew his name. But he spoke quiet, didn't ask for drink or direction, just paused at the trading post to buy oats and salt pork. When the storekeep offered gossip in place of change, he took it with a nod but said nothing back. That night he camped on the ridge, lit no fire, let the dark press close. She came to him in silence, more shadow than skin. He didn't move when she stepped from the brush, didn't lift his hand to his pistol or his mouth to speak. Her eyes, wide and flat as creek ice, stared back at him, and still he didn't speak. He stood slowly, shrugging the coat from his shoulders and holding it out. She flinched. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said. His voice was hoarse, rasped from too many miles and too little water. She stared at the coat, then at him. A long pause dragged between them like a taut wire. "I seen what they did," he said. The wind moaned low. "You got a name?" he asked. She didn't answer, but she took the coat. And when he turned to unsaddle his horse, she was still there, watching. When he laid his bedroll down, she circled twice like a wild dog before curling up just out of reach. Her breath came in broken rhythm, as if her lungs remembered panic more than rest. He didn't sleep much, not with the weight of her silence beside him and the memory of old hurts behind. But when the morning came, and she was still there, he said nothing, just handed her the reins of the horse and walked on foot beside. They traveled west. Each mile was a question unspoken, an answer held tight in the space between them. He didn't ask what she ran from. She didn't ask why he helped. But the wild things were watching, and the land remembered blood. That was how it began. By the third morning, her feet had stopped bleeding. The coat hung heavy on her shoulders, too big by half, and smelled of horse sweat and cedar smoke. She didn't speak, but she watched everything. The arc of the sun across his cheek, the way he knelt to fill the canteen without rippling the water, the call of birds she could not name. He noticed, though never said so. She rode stiff in the saddle like someone unused to stillness, as though movement had become her only safety. Her hands gripped the pommel not from fear, but from muscle memory, like someone who once learned to hold tight or fall hard. He walked beside, quiet as a ghost. The horse followed his lead without need for command. A gelding with one blind eye and a bite scar behind the ear, same as the man leading him, scarred, half-seeing but steady. They crossed into higher country, where the trees grew close and the snow melted into mud underfoot. Spring coming slow, like a promise made with fingers crossed. At night, they camped by small creeks or in hollows thick with moss. He'd skin rabbits and cook them plain. She'd eat in silence, eyes flicking to the tree line with every snap of a twig. She didn't trust sleep, not fully. But one night, her breath slowed before his. He let her be. On the 7th day, they came upon a burned-out cabin. The chimney still stood, blackened but proud, like a throat with no voice. Charred bits of cloth fluttered from what had been rafters. He didn't ask who had lived there or why they'd died. She stepped through the ash, trailing her fingers along the half-standing wall. When she came out, her hands were gray with soot. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just walked past him and kept on down the trail. That night she built the fire. With flint and dry bark, her hands steady and practiced. He watched the sparks catch, the fire grow. Then she sat across from him and for the first time looked him in the eyes without flinching. "My name's Mara." She said it like an offering, like a thing she hadn't used in years. He nodded, "Jonas." That was all. No past, no trade of sorrows, just names passed like water between cupped hands. In the days that followed, a rhythm began to shape itself. He hunted, she gathered, he mended leather, she stitched cloth, her silence softened. His gait slowed to match her pace. Sometimes she hummed under her breath, crooked little tunes with no words like lullabies sung to ghosts. Then came the storm. It hit sudden as a gunshot, lightning cracking the sky in half. They found shelter beneath a rock outcrop, wind howling like wolves above them. Mara pressed back against the stone, shaking. Jonas threw the coat over them both and held her by the shoulder, not tight, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. "You've seen worse," he said. She nodded against his chest. Her hands clutched his side, thin fingers digging deep. Storm can't take what's already survived. They waited it out. Hours passed like years. When the thunder finally limped off into the mountains and the rain softened to mist, she pulled away slow and looked up. "You don't ask questions." Jonas shrugged. "Figure if you wanted to tell me, you would." She stared at him a while, then in a voice small and sharp-edged said, "They tied me to a tree." "I know. They said I brought death." "You didn't." "I did, though, not the way they meant, but it still followed me." She turned her face from him then, but not before he saw the tears she didn't wipe away. Jonas didn't touch her, didn't try to fix what couldn't be undone. He just reached into his saddlebag, took out a chunk of bread wrapped in cloth, and offered it with both hands. And when she took it, their fingers touched. That was the first time she let herself be warm. Spring unfurled slow, like a child learning to walk, halting, stubborn, full of false starts. Green came first in the crocus buds along the riverbank, then in the softing of the wind. Ice broke on the high creeks. Birds returned, timid and hopeful. Mara began to laugh. Not often and not for long, but once, when Jonas cursed at a rabbit that escaped his snare, she let slip a sound that might have been joy. He looked at her like a man who'd spotted a flame in the dark, and she turned away embarrassed, but didn't stop smiling. They followed no map. The land led them westward, over rises rimmed in sage, down through pine-shadowed hollows. They skirted a mining town once, its smoke-stained chimneys coughing into the sky, and Jonas watched her go still as stone when the bells rang for shift change. They moved wide around it, saying nothing. Mara didn't ask where they were headed. Jonas never said. The going itself was enough. Each mile put more earth between her and that tree, more silence between him and whatever ghosts he rode with. They came to a valley one dusk, long and wide and blooming gold under the sinking sun. A shallow creek stitched it through the middle, its banks dotted with cottonwood. Jonas stopped on a ridge, looking out. Mara drew up beside him. "Pretty," she said. He nodded, "Could be a place to rest a while." She gave him a sideways glance. "You tired of moving?" He hesitated, then said, "No, but I don't mind stopping." That night they made camp near the water. Jonas caught fish with a hook and line. Mara roasted them on flat stones by the coals. After they ate, she unbraided her hair, and he noticed how long it had grown. "You always been on your own?" she asked, not meeting his eyes. Jonas tossed another stick into the fire. "Had a brother once, died in Missouri, war took him." Her fingers twitched. "You fought." He shook his head. "Ran cattle, tried to keep to the hills. Didn't matter, though. Folks pick sides for you." She was quiet a long while. "I had a husband," she said. Jonas didn't move. "He died too, before they called me witch." She traced a scar along her wrist. "He was cruel. I didn't mourn him. That was the first thing they didn't forgive." Jonas didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his knife and began carving into a bit of cedar. A bird, maybe, or a horse. It was too early to tell. The fire cracked low. Later, when they lay beneath the stars, she moved closer. Not touching, but nearer than before. Her breath was steady now, her shoulders no longer curled in on themselves. In the morning, he found her by the creek, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing the hem of the coat he'd given her. Her bare arms shone pale in the light, muscles lean and knotted with survival. He didn't say a word, just sat on a stump nearby, whittling. They stayed in that valley a week. Built a linta from saplings and hides, made smoked meat from deer Jonas felled with a long shot. Mara gathered bitterroot and wild onion. Their days took on shape. She laughed more. He slept better. When the rains came, they rode out the storm in the shelter they'd built with their hands. On the 8th night, she woke him with a hand to his shoulder. "Someone's coming." Jonas sat up, reaching for the rifle. Mara pointed toward the south bend in the creek, where boot tracks had split the soft earth. Fresh. They packed in silence, saddled the horse, smothered the fire. Before the sun had risen, they were riding again, shadows long behind them. "Who?" he asked once they'd put 10 miles behind them. She shook her head. "Don't know, but I felt it like rot in the wind." He didn't argue. Some things didn't need proving. The trail narrowed through the switchbacks, dust thick with pine needles and the sour tang of mule sweat. Jonas led the horse by the reins, letting Mara ride. She didn't argue any more when he did that, her pride softened by long miles and shared burdens. They didn't speak of the tracks by the creek, but each step had a sharper edge since. Jonas kept his rifle closer. Mara's eyes scanned the ridgelines like she'd learned to read the land as warning, not beauty. Trust, once a trickle, had grown steady between them, but even water cuts through stone with time. On the 4th night of riding, they came to an old trapper's outpost half fallen into itself. Moss crawled over the roof. The door leaned on one hinge. Inside, the walls held carvings, names, dates, a scratched tally of winters. Jonas tested the beams and declared it sturdy enough to keep the cold out. Mara found a rusted tin cup, dented and half full of dirt. She turned it in her hands like it held some secret. "We'll stay here a while," Jonas said. She nodded. "I'll clean." He watched her go, boots light on the warped floorboards. By dusk, the place held a kind of warmth, not from fire but from order. A swept floor, bedding unfurled, the walls no longer hollow with disuse. Jonas set a trapline in the gullies and hung rabbit for stew. Mara laid kindling just so, coaxed flame like she'd coaxed it 100 times in fear and now, maybe, for comfort. Later they sat shoulder to shoulder near the hearth. She leaned into him without words. He didn't move, just let her be. "Do you believe in signs?" she asked suddenly. Jonas considered, "Like omens." "No, more like small things that mean something bigger." He thought of the first time he saw her, the way the snow hushed when she stepped into camp, the way she'd taken the coat like it weighed more than wool. "I think they're everywhere," he said. She nodded once, like that answer mattered. They fell into routine again, days filled with chores and quiet. Mara mended old blankets, humming that same tune with no name, Jonas tanned hides. The world outside was still uncertain, but inside the outpost a kind of peace held. Until the man came. He showed near twilight, walking the trail bold as if it belonged to him. Tall, lean, face shaded under a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't knock, just stood at the tree line watching them. Jonas stood slow, rifle in hand but not raised. "You lookin' for someone?" he called. The man didn't answer. Then Mara stepped out behind Jonas, her breath catching like it hit a wall. She knew him. Her fingers trembled on the doorframe. Jonas felt her shift, felt the fear spike like flint on steel. The man smiled, cold and easy. "You left a mess behind, Mara." She didn't speak. He stepped closer, hand resting lazy on the butt of his pistol. "Thought maybe the coyotes got you, would have been fitting." Jonas moved between them. "I don't reckon you're welcome here," he said. The man's eyes slid over him like he was dust. "And you are." "Doesn't matter." They stared a long moment. Mara's voice came small but clear. "His name's Eli. He's not law, just mean." Jonas's jaw tightened. Eli's grin widened. "You sweet on her now, that it." He stepped forward. Jonas raised the rifle. Eli froze, eyes narrowing. "You ain't got the spine for it, cowboy." "I've got enough." Silence crackled. Then Eli laughed, turned, and walked off into the trees like it didn't matter, like it wasn't finished. But Mara didn't move for hours after. She just sat on the edge of the cot, coat in her lap, hands clenched white. And Jonas, for the first time since they met, didn't know what to say. Because she hadn't run before, but now she might. By morning, the woods were silent in that thick, listening way that meant something was wrong. Jonas rose early before Mara stirred and tracked the trail Eli had left. It was easy at first, boots pressed deep in soft loam, a broken branch here, crushed fern there. But then the signs vanished, clean like a man trained to disappear. He didn't follow further. Some things you don't chase unless you're willing to catch them. When he returned to the cabin, Mara was outside, sitting cross-legged in the frost-kissed grass. She held her hands to the rising sun like it might tell her something. "I should have killed him years ago," she said, not turning. Jonas crouched beside her. "Why didn't you?" She was quiet for a long while. "Because I thought I deserved what he did." Jonas said nothing. "He owned a claim near Dead Dog Ridge, made me sleep in the shaft some nights when he was drunk or sore, said I was bad luck under his roof. The others didn't interfere. You don't cross a man with gold." Jonas looked out over the meadow. "You ever try to run?" "I did," her voice wavered. "He found me, took a branding iron to my back, told the others I'd cursed his mine. After that, they called me witch." A hawk cried above, circling. Jonas reached into his coat pocket and took out the cedar carving. A sparrow, rough-hewn and unfinished. "It's not pretty," he said, offering it. Mara turned it over in her hands. "It's honest." They didn't speak again that day, but something had changed. Not between them, between Mara and the world. She stood straighter, built the fire with purpose. When Jonas fetched water, she went with him, rifle slung across her back. 2 nights later, Eli returned. Not alone. 4 men rode with him, all hard-eyed and hungry, the kind that smelled weakness from miles off. Jonas saw them from the ridge while checking traps. He ran. When he burst into the cabin, Mara was already packing, rifle loaded, saddlebag half filled. "We can't outrun 5, she said. "No," Jonas agreed, "but we don't have to outrun them, just make sure they don't catch us on flat ground." They moved fast, back into the trees, into the old elk paths and deer runs. Jonas knew the land well enough to lead them crooked and high, where hooves would slip and guns wouldn't aim straight. They climbed until their legs burned, until Mara had to lean on him, and still they didn't stop. By dawn, they reached an old hunting blind carved into a cliffside, half cave, half nest. Jonas used to come here alone, in winters past, when he needed silence that wouldn't follow him home. They crouched inside, breath ragged. Below, the trees whispered secrets to the wind. "They'll find us," Mara said. "Maybe." She looked at him. "You ever killed a man?" Jonas didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said. "When?" "Before I met you." She stared a moment. "Why?" He didn't flinch. "Because someone like Eli told me to." Her gaze softened. "And now?" "Now I'd do it to stop someone like him." They watched the woods in silence, eyes sharp. And when the first rider appeared, they didn't run. The first man rode with his hat low and rifle across his lap, weaving lazy through the trees like he wasn't hunting so much as waiting for fear to bloom. Behind him came the others, spread out in a wide crescent. Eli rode last. He didn't hurry. He knew the smell of prey too long cornered. Mara watched them from the cave's mouth, her breath shallow, eyes narrowed to slits. The coat Jonas gave her was tied around her waist now, sleeves flapping like banners. Her hands were steady on the rifle. "They'll circle and try to smoke us out," Jonas said low. "We got one shot at surprising them." She nodded. "Then we take it." They waited as the riders closed in, hooves muffled in moss and needled loam. Jonas moved to the other side of the blind, taking position behind a fallen log. The trapline he'd set days earlier now served another purpose, snares hidden just beyond the path, enough to break a leg or take a man off a horse if he wasn't watching. The first caught was the youngest. His bay reared up screaming and he went down hard, tangled in steel. His cry snapped the tension. Gunfire cracked through the pines. Jonas sighted and fired once, clean through the chest of a man drawing too slow. Then chaos. Smoke and hoofbeats. A shot punched into the cave's wall near Mara's head. She returned fire without flinching, face stony. Another man fell, clutching his side, crawling back into the brush. Then Eli's voice rose, clear as a bell in church. "Mara, enough of this." She froze. "You want peace, you come down. No more blood. I'll forgive the running." Jonas saw her hand twitch on the trigger. "I swear, Mara, you come now, I won't lay a finger. You and your quiet little cowboy can ride free." She didn't speak. Jonas looked at her. "You believe him?" Her jaw clenched. "No." Then she stepped out into the light. Not with her hands up, not in surrender, but with the rifle at her side and her coat dragging in the dirt behind her. She walked slow, deliberate. Eli stepped from behind a pine, pistol raised. "Mara," he said, voice honey-thick. She stopped 10 paces from him. "You never deserved any of it," she said. "The land, the mine, me." He tilted his head. "That's so. You just took what you wanted. And what do you think you're doing now?" Her eyes hardened, taking it back. She lifted the rifle. Eli fired first. But his bullet struck the coat, still bundled around her hips, and lodged in the thick wool. She didn't flinch. Her shot hit center chest. He staggered back, surprise blooming in his eyes like a second sunrise. Then he fell. It was over in seconds. The last man fled, wild-eyed and bleeding. The forest took him. Silence returned. Mara stood still, the rifle lowering inch by inch. Her breath shook, but her hands did not. Jonas came to her side. He didn't touch her, just stood there, close enough for her to lean on if she chose. She did. That night they burned what remained of the fight. Saddles, boots, blood-stained cloth. Eli's body, wrapped in pine boughs, fed the flames. Mara said nothing, just watched. In the days after, they didn't speak much. Words were small beside what had passed between them. But they returned to the valley, the one with the creek and cottonwoods, the one she'd called pretty. They built a cabin, not big, not fine, but strong. She planted wild onion near the door. He whittled a sparrow and set it on the windowsill. Spring came fuller then. Mara laughed more. Jonas watched her in the mornings, bare feet in dew-wet grass, face turned to sun like a woman remembering how to be. They never spoke of the tree she was tied to. They never had to, because he'd given her a coat and a horse. But more than that, he stayed.